Welcome to Discovering the Law. My name is attorney Lucy Rivera and I am your host today. Today in Discovering the Law can be viewed at our blog www.discoveringthelaw.com, and you can also contact me at lucinda.rivera.discoveringthelaw.com. The topic of today's program is jury selection and jury duty, and we have a very special guest, Judge Jose Albino Sanchez. Judge Sanchez is the Associate Justice of the Juvenile Court in Essex County. Judge Sanchez, we're pleased to have you as our guest today.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm honored to be here today.
Judge Sanchez, please tell us, what is jury duty?
Well, it's a pretty broad question, but it covers so many wonderful aspects of our criminal justice system. Jury duty is every citizen's obligation to serve either on a civil matter or a criminal matter, and basically sit in the role of a judge, deciding the facts of a case, being able to render a verdict, a true verdict in any case, based solely on the evidence that is presented in the courtroom. It is every citizen's obligation to serve on jury duty when they are called, and it is also a wonderful opportunity for someone to exercise directly one of the most precious rights that are granted to us by the Constitution.
And Judge Sanchez, who is eligible to serve?
If you are a U.S. citizen, 18 years of age or older, and if you reside in the judicial district where you are called, you are eligible to serve. Now, there are a lot of exceptions to that, of course, depending on age. Certainly, if you don't speak English, you can be excused from jury duty. And there are other reasons, but essentially, everyone is eligible to serve, with the exception of certain categories of individuals who, for one reason or another, may not be eligible. One thing that I should add is, as long as you live in the judicial district, or if you live more than 50% of the time in the judicial district where you are called, you are eligible to serve. And by judicial district, I'm referring to what in Massachusetts we commonly call counties, whether it's Essex County, Suffolk County. So for example, a prospective juror who lives in Essex County would not serve on a jury that's called in Suffolk County.
Well, that's very interesting to know for all our viewers. Also, how many times can you be called for jury duty once you're called in the county?
Well, the minimum period in which you can be called is 3 years. And that means exactly 3 years to the date. So if you serve in January of 2010, you would not be eligible to serve again until January 2013. Mm-hmm. Keep in mind, though, that does not mean that everyone will be called every 3 years. Some people are called every 3 or 4 years. Some people aren't called for 15 or 20 years. It really is sort of the luck of the draw as they pull your name in order to be called for jury duty.
And what happens in jury duty?
Well, when you report for jury duty, first of all, when you receive the summons, you will be able to fill out a juror questionnaire. Mm-hmm. And you can actually do that online at www.majury.gov. When you fill out the jury questionnaire online, you'll then be able to print it out from your home, and you can then bring that to you when you report for duty on the date, at the time, and at the court to which you are summoned. When you report for jury duty, you should have all of those documents ready. You report into the courthouse. The court officers will guide you to the jury pool room. You can then give all of that information to what's called the jury pool officer, and they will then begin the processing for that day's work in the courthouse.
And Judge Sanchez, do you need to appear the date and the time that you are indicated in your little summons card when you receive it?
You do need to appear on that date and on that time. Mm-hmm. However, if there are extenuating circumstances, you can certainly call the jury commissioner's office at 1-800-THE-JURY, or you can go online and you can ask to be rescheduled if there's a particular hardship. And we certainly understand that sometimes we have obligations that we're not able to reschedule. You'll get the summons usually 2 months in advance or so. When you receive it, that's the opportunity to say, am I going to be available on that date in order to serve? But if for some reason there's a hardship and you can't, by either going online or calling the jury commissioner's office, we'll try to be very accommodating and try to schedule you on a date that is perhaps more convenient for everyone.
And in the case you don't do that and people fail to appear, what happens to them?
Well, unfortunately, some people don't appear when they're scheduled. 30 days after you fail to appear, the jury commissioner's office can proceed to file a criminal complaint. But we try to avoid that at all costs. My suggestion is, if you receive a summons and for any reason an emergency came up that day that you're not able to go to jury duty, you should call the office right away, or even call the courthouse directly, and we will try to reschedule you for another date. There's no need to undergo any sort of formal process or anything like that. What we try to do is make sure that it is not an inconvenience to the citizens of the Commonwealth.
That's is good to hear. And can anyone serve as a juror, or do you need special training or education?
That's a great question. A lot of people think, their initial reaction is, I can't serve as a juror. I don't have any special training or any special education. I think the really magnificent part about our jury system is that you don't need any special education or experience in order to serve as a juror. A juror consists of 12 individuals who are impartial, who can render a true, fair, and just verdict. You don't need to be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer. You don't need a college degree. To be quite honest, you don't even need a high school diploma. What you do need is the ability to listen very carefully, to follow instructions, and to listen carefully not only to the judge in the instructions that they provide at the beginning of a trial, but also to listen very carefully to all of the witnesses, because a juror is a judge of that witness. They're deciding whether or not to believe that witness. And that's something that we do in everyday life. When we meet people for the first time, or we get to know people over a period of time, whether we do it consciously or not, we're judging whether or not we believe that person. We're assessing their credibility. And that's essentially what a juror does with a witness on the stand. They listen carefully, they listen to conflicting testimony, they try to resolve the differences in the conflicting testimony. And together with the other jurors, engaging in a dialogue, engaging in a discussion with other jurors on that trial, hopefully everyone will be able to reach a consensus as to what is the true and just verdict on that particular case.
It is, in fact, a very important role in society to be a juror. And for all our viewers, our topic today is jury selection, becoming a juror. And our guest today is Judge Jose Albino Sanchez from the Juvenile Court in Essex County. So Judge Sanchez, when the pool of people arrive and they are providing all this information about themselves, what kind of information do they provide, and what do the court system, what do they do with all this information from people who are jurors?
The juror questionnaire elicits information about your employment, your spouse, their employment, how many children you have, where you live, and where exactly, whether or not you've had any involvement in the legal system. Whether you've ever been a litigant in a civil matter, in a criminal matter, whether you've ever been the victim of a crime, whether or not you have any family members who have been victims of crime, or whether you have any family members that are police officers. That's the sort of information that a judge and the attorneys need in order to decide whether or not you can render a fair and just verdict on the case that you might be impaneled on. Now, that information gets distributed in the courtroom, but the only people that will receive it are the judge and the attorneys. The information is then retained by all of the court officers. They collect all of those questionnaires at the end of impanelment, and all of that information is destroyed. It is not a public document. That information is not available to the public, and we use it only to make certain that the impanelment and the jury selection process is fair.
Oh, thank you, Judge Sanchez. And for these jurors who are taking this time and being selected, how long do they have to serve?
Well, it used to be in Massachusetts that you would serve either for a week, sometimes even for a month. And we realize that that can be a burden. Whether you're employed, whether you're a single parent taking care of a child, or whether you're taking care of an elderly loved one in the home, that sort of commitment takes a lot out of everybody's daily schedule. So several years ago, the Commonwealth changed it in order to have every juror serve one day or one trial. Now, what that means is that if you report for jury duty at 9 o'clock in the morning, you're processed, and if you're in the jury pool room and you're never called into the courtroom for impanelment, when you're excused at the end of the day, you have fulfilled your jury duty for the 3-year period. If you are impaneled on a case, if that case or that trial takes 1 day, you must serve for that 1 day. If it takes a week, you have to serve for that entire week as well. So it's either 1 day or 1 trial. Depending on the nature of the trial, whether it's civil, whether it's criminal, that will determine. When you impanel in the morning, the judge will take the time to let you know how long the trial is going to be. And again, if there's a particular hardship that you have, that you are not able to serve for beyond the 1 day period, or if you're not able to serve for a week, that's the time to let the judge know, so that they can consider whether or not you should be excused from jury duty on that particular trial.
And Judge Sanchez, say you are called for jury duty on district court, and it's only in a 3-year period that they cannot call you again. What about Superior Court or Housing Court? Do they fall under that rule also? Or?
All of the courts and all of the jury selection or the jury eligibility falls under the same criteria. Okay. It is a 3-year period from which you are required to serve. And if you receive a summons 2 years and 11 months from the day that you last served, all you need to do is call the Office of the Jury Commissioner and let them know. We have our records. They may ask for documentation if they need it, and they will then excuse you from that particular call to service.
That's good to know. And who are these jurors paid by the government for the service or by their employees?
Well, if you're employed outside of the home, your employer has the obligation to pay you for the first 3 days of service. If the jury service extends beyond the 3rd day, the government will provide a small reimbursement for your jury service for every day on the 4th, starting on the 4th day thereafter.
Very good. And what are the obligations of the jurors once they are selected?
That's a good question, I think, because a lot of jurors don't understand that there really are obligations and restrictions and responsibilities put on them. First of all, you have to be fair. You have to be impartial. Specifically, the judge will instruct you that you may not discuss the case with anyone. And that includes family members as well. I think there's a temptation that when you go home in the evening, if you're impaneled on a case, your children, your spouse, your family, your friends will all be asking you, so tell me, what happened? What kind of a case is it? Who testified? What do you think? It's tempting, but you cannot engage in those sort of discussions, and there's a reason for it. Your verdict has to be based solely on the evidence that's presented in the courtroom, and you should not really make a decision until all of the evidence is closed and until you receive the instructions on the law from the judge in the courtroom. There's always a temptation that if you start discussing the case with someone outside of the courtroom, they're going to give you their opinion, they're going to give you their assessment, and that would not be fair to any defendant or any litigant in a civil matter for that case as well. And you should base it solely on that evidence presented. There's another temptation in the electronic age to engage in independent research, or to post on Facebook, or to send out notices on Twitter, or to text other people about the case, or to accept texts from other people about the case as well. You should not engage in any sort of extraneous communications, electronic research, or electronic communications about the case while the case is being considered by you.
And you're doing this to ensure a fair process.
Exactly. It's to really make certain that there's no outside extraneous influence imposed on a juror from their discussing the case with other individuals.
Yes. And now you indicated there are a pool of people who are called to be service for jury duty. What's the process of excusing them? What does a juror do when they're excused, and what does that mean?
You can be excused from jury duty on any particular case. That doesn't mean that you're excused for the day. There are really 2 types of what are called challenges. When you go into a courtroom and you're being considered as a prospective juror on a trial, there's a challenge for cause. A challenge for cause is where there is some other reasons why you should not be eligible to serve on that case. It could be that you know the lawyers. It could be that you know the defendant. Or it could even be that you have been exposed to newspaper articles or television programs about the case, and being exposed to that sort of information before you're impaneled maybe has influenced your ability to be a fair and impartial juror. There are other reasons for cause, but a judge will make a decision whether or not to excuse you for cause. The second type of excusal is one that's called a peremptory challenge, where the judge can, or the attorneys can excuse you for any reason whatsoever. That is the right of a defendant, and depending on the nature of the case, they will have a certain number of peremptory challenges. As long as those challenges are not based on race, sex, gender, age, ethnicity, or any of those other prohibited factors, you can be excused from serving on that particular case. But what will happen then is the judge will then instruct you to go back to the jury pool room, and it's entirely possible that you could be called to serve on another trial in that same courthouse on the same date. So it's possible that if you're excused from one trial, you're still eligible to serve on another case. And if you're excused from that second one, you very well could be eligible to serve on another matter.
Very interesting. So what are the different cases that a juror can hear?
There are many. There are criminal cases, there are civil cases, there are misdemeanors, there are felonies. You could also be called to serve in housing court, in the district court, in superior court, and even in my court, in the juvenile court. Juveniles are entitled to jury trials on both misdemeanors and felonies, and you could be serving on any number of cases in any of those four courts.
Very interesting. Our guest today is Judge Jose Albino Sanchez. He is the Associate Justice of the Juvenile Court in Essex County. And my name is Lucy Rivera, and I'm your host. This program can be viewed again at www.discoveringthelaw.com. And Judge Sanchez, please tell us, so what happens once you're impaneled and you're a juror and you're ready to serve your day, and you serve one day, but you are somewhat of a forgetful person and do not show up on the next court date?
Well, that could present some serious problems. If you do not appear on the following day of trial, you could very well receive a criminal complaint for failing to appear. A judge could hold you in contempt. But again, what we try to do is we try to be very understanding. There could very well have been a legitimate reason, an extenuating circumstance. Although it's frowned upon, we try to discourage that as much as possible because of the delay that it would cause in either a criminal matter or a civil matter. The judge may give you the opportunity to serve again at a future date, but all jurors should understand, if you're impaneled and you fail to appear, you could be subject to criminal sanctions, and your jury service is not fulfilled for that period of time. So just because you were impaneled for the one day, you have to actually complete your jury service in order to be eligible for that 3-year period.
And our viewers will recognize Judge Sanchez because he's actually the person who's training in the video for the jurors.
Yes.
Am I correct?
Yes.
And so Judge Sanchez, if people need more information about jury service, what can they obtain it?
Well, you can go to the jury website, which is www.majury.gov, and on there we have tried to answer most of the more common questions that jurors have. Also, the juror handbook, which is provided to all jurors when they're called for jury service. That's also available online. And if you'd like to review that ahead of time, it is there in writing. You can download it, print it, and then you'll be thoroughly familiar with the process once you arrive at the courthouse.
And Judge Sanchez, I just wanted to let everyone know that Judge Sanchez actually began his career as an attorney when he was 31 years old.
I did.
And he went to Fordham University in New York, and then he attended Northeastern University.
Right here in Boston.
And but you were tell us about your illustrious career as an air traffic controller.
Well, before I became an attorney, I was an air traffic controller. I worked in New York airports, and I also worked at Logan Airport. And then in 1981, I had a change in careers. All of the air traffic controllers in the nation went on strike. and President Reagan chose to dismiss us all, and at that point, I had to start rebuilding my career, and it was at that point that I tried a few different things, but eventually I decided the law was for me, and I applied to Northeastern. They were gracious enough to accept me, and I think that was the beginning of a pretty wonderful third career for me.
And we are proud to have role models in our community, the Latin community, and have Judge Sanchez as an illustrious member of the Massachusetts Association of Hispanic Attorneys. He's been in many of our panels, and we are very grateful that he is there as a judge to contribute to society.
Well, thank you very much. Sitting in Lawrence is also a bonus for me because I get to go out to the schools and do outreach there to the students and help them understand the importance of jury service, the importance of obeying our laws, and also trying to make absolutely certain that we have some positive activities for them to participate in.
And what do you have? What's your message for the people out there who are going to be in jury service, and or for people in juvenile court, your people that you see every day?
Most people are intimidated by the process, but in my discussions with jurors, at the end of every single trial, every single juror that I've spoken to says to me that they absolutely enjoyed the experience, that they felt vested in the process, they felt that they delivered justice, and they felt that they were actually able to contribute to our government and our system of justice and laws.
And that's very interesting because it is true. And what do you feel about the system, about the jury system?
The jury system works. I think a lot of people are often very skeptical, and far too many people will say, well, gee, if I were on a jury, I wouldn't do that. Or what was the jury thinking? But those are individuals who are basing their decision on newspaper articles, on comments by other people. When you sit in the jury room and you sit in the courtroom, you are able to listen to evidence that comes from the mouths of witnesses that saw what happened. You're able to make an assessment of the credibility of the individuals, and you're able to render a true and just verdict based on evidence that is material, that's reliable, that a judge has screened and said, this is the sort of evidence that will help the juror make a decision. Not make a decision in any particular direction, but be able to make a decision based solely on what actually happened on that date.
And to ensure that process, as you mentioned, there are ways to select jury people out of the process by peremptory strikes or any other
or challenges for cause, exactly,
which will ensure that you have a jury pool representative of the community that you are.
Absolutely, and that's why we encourage everyone. All age brackets, all backgrounds, all educational backgrounds. It's important to have that diversity on a jury because you wouldn't want just one component of our population to sit in judgment of other individuals. That's why it's a random selection process. It's not, the jury names are not taken just from, say, motor vehicle lists, because then only people that have cars would serve on juries. It's not taken from voter registration lists, because then only people that vote would be on the jury. It's actually taken from the yearly census that every town and city conducts. When you live at a certain address, City Hall will send you what's called the yearly census, and it asks you your name, who lives in the home, whether you have any pets, who else lives there, whether you're a registered voter. That information is sent back to the City Hall of each city and every town. That's where we get all of the information because it is the most representative information about our population that we can possibly gather.
Demystifying the jury selection process with Judge Jose Albino Sanchez. We're grateful to have you today, Judge
Thank you very
Thank
much.
You so
I
much
appreciate the opportunity.
To all our viewers, this was www.discoveringthelaw.com, which is our blog where you can see this program again. And my name is Lucy Rivera, your host. And please email me your suggestions, your questions at lucinda.rivera@discoveringthelaw.com. Discoveringthelaw.com. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you on our next segment.